up to you.
Right.
Okay. One other thing to point out, though, is that so far, even though this is an introduction to ASP.NET, all we've seen is hello world string
Strings, yeah, that's all.
and some static HTML. I think we'll come back and we'll learn more about model view controller.
Yep, what it is and when we use it.
Absolutely. We are back, and we are almost to the MVC part of ASP.NET Core introduction. Not quite, but almost. What we're going to do here is we're going to give you a little bit of extra context. Now, if you want to save a little time, it's okay. You can skip ahead to directly into the MVC portion of the day. But we wanted to do a little bit of work on routing, because if you look here, we've got app.run and response.write async, but that's not very sophisticated. All we really did was say hello world. We talked a lot, but only hello world got
Yeah,
said.
all we did was just send one lines over to the browser.
And we didn't do anything based on what the URL was, right?
No, we didn't even really touch on that at all.
Exactly. So we could skip to MVC and a lot of context would potentially be lost, but we thought we would spend a few minutes talking about routing.
So how can I think about routing? Would it be what the request is when I ask for it, when I go to a web page? So if I go to my blog and I'm looking for a particular post and it goes to that post, is that what routing is?
Right. So if you said /post/6.
Post 6.
Somebody has to know that they're the handler for /post.
Yeah, that they're in control of that. Is that what routing does for us?
Exactly. So if we look here, app.run is doing it for all requests.
Everything.
Everything. What we want to do is we want to say, and I'll just do this in a comment, I'll say, who handles /Maria, who handles /Scott, and then to your example, who handles /blog/6 or whatever. So this little chunk of code handles everything. How would we split this up and start dealing with single responsibilities principle? We want to have little bits of code that are responsible for just what they do and no more. And routing is better than going and writing a bunch of if statements.
Yes. That doesn't seem too sophisticated and also looks tedious.
It would not scale at all.
So it would be a lot of repetition.
It would absolutely be a lot of repetition. All right. So we're going to continue. So we're going to continue with this little empty ASP.NET Core application. And I'm going to go over to References and say Manage NuGet Packages. All right.
So there must be a routing package.
There is a routing package, exactly. And as you use ASP.NET, you'll learn about the different packages that are available for you. So here is ASP.NET Core middleware, and it's important to remember that all these building blocks are middleware.
So pretty much every single dependency that we work with is some sort of middleware?
Almost. Any ASP.NET dependency that changes the pipeline from the moment the request comes in until the moment the response goes back is a piece of middleware.
Okay.
Okay? And you remember that we added static files as a middleware so that when the request came in for index.html, static file middleware had the first chance.
Oh yes, remember when we switched it around because it wasn't recognizing it?
Exactly, and then the say hello middleware basically won.
Yes, because it was ahead of it.
And the static file never fired.
So order matters.
Order matters. So we're going to go in here and say install routing. All right, and accept that. All right, and we will go back down here and remember before when we had some services that we needed to add. Routing has some services that it needs.
Okay.
So we're going to say services.add routing. We're telling it about routing and we're letting it know if you need to get a bunch of stuff and services, get them ready because we're going to turn routing on. All right?
All right.
So right now we've got our developer exception page. We'll explore that a little bit later. And we've got our do it function, which is basically everything that comes in goes through there. Now we're going to do this pattern again. We've seen this before, right? These builders. Route builder. I'm going to say new route builder. And notice it doesn't find it because I have to add that.
Using namespace. Yeah.
Using namespace, exactly right. So we'll go like that, and then we're going to pass in the app. We're telling route builder about the app. We're passing it in.
And all the things that's showing out in the bottom are the different options that you can do?
Right. So there's actually two overloads for route builder. One that takes an app one that takes an app, and a potential default handler. I'm not going to deal with that because routing's pretty low level. We're just going to talk about it kind of abstractly and move into MVC. So now I'm going to take that route builder, the one that I just made, and we're going to look at this.
So what is it? Is this when I say map get? Is it like getting?
We want to map some get. An HTTP get might be get/Maria.
So these are just HTTP get, post, all that stuff that we know?
Exactly. So these are mapping of the major verbs, get, post, put, delete. And then down here, map verb would mean like for an obscure verb like options or one that doesn't get used very often. Okay. So we'll say, let's map a get, and I'll just map it on quote, quote. We're passing in a template. So the route that matches that given template. So this should be like the default route, this, the nothing route.
Okay.
And then we'll do just like we did before, context dot response dot write async.
I think you're missing a context to that.
You're absolutely right. Thank you for that. Hello from routing.
So when this application is fired up and we see hello from routing, that is being handled by the router.
Hopefully that middleware gets in there ahead of this, and it will not say hello world. This is the hello world catch-all.
Oh yeah.
Right? But we need to say route builder dot build, just like we do that with all of our builders. And we have to tell the app around it. Remember how we've been saying use this and use that? We say use router.
Okay.
So here's the deal. Let's look at these 3 lines together. We say route builder. In this case, we're giving it one route. We're going to build that up into a router, and then we're going to say use this router. Adds a router middleware to this app. So those 3 lines together are really basic routing, and let's see if we got it right. Maybe we did, maybe we didn't. All right, look at that.
Okay, so.
Yep, hello from routing.
And fancy production.
All right, let's try something else. Let's try /foo. Okay, so quote, quote, or nothing.
Yeah.
That's hello from routing. Anything else, like foo or bar,
is coming from app.run?
Is coming from app.run. Exactly. So let's do a little experimentation.
Should we try getting rid of app.run?
That's a good question. Yeah, I guess it would probably, let's do that. That'll probably end up being a 404 then. Good experiment to try. Okay, fire that up. Hello from routing. /foo is a 404.
Because it's not there.
All right. So then a question would be, let's add another route. Right? So now we're building up a routing table.
Oh, that's going to navigate to all these different...
It's going to know about all these different things, and it's going to, oops, what did our error get there? Let's see, a little error. Oh, I left my application running. Of course, I haven't switched over to IIS yet, which would solve a lot of those problems for me. So there's hello from routing. And if we say /Maria, your stuff fires, okay? So it knows by looking at the URL that it matches, this is called a string template or a URL template. And templates can be much more sophisticated. Right now, we're just saying, like Maria, that's just a word. Let's try something else. I don't even know if this will work. Okay. Because URLs can be complicated and have all sorts of fancy features. All right. See the difference there?
I see the difference.
An important reminder, as if it's not, it might be obvious to everybody, but just a good reminder that what the URL looks like isn't necessarily what the files on disk look like. Right? There isn't a Scott folder and a
no,
foo folder.
It's not there.
Right. So it's a mapping that doesn't necessarily have a physical, like I can't go look for the Scott foo thing.
Yeah, and like you couldn't go and see the source of this, like a page, an HTML page.
Well, yeah, exactly. The source is just what got returned back. I can't. There's no file that's being served here. It is that little bit of code. So the router is saying this URL template matches the URL that got passed in. Therefore, execute this little piece of code. And I could build an app with like this way, but it would get pretty.
It looks like it would get pretty messy.
It would get pretty messy. Actually, let's see if we can get a little messier before we give up. So let's actually have it so we can pass in like your, you said post, right?
Yeah.
Like a blog. We'll say map get, and we'll say post, and then we'll say post number. Okay? And you see how we've done it like it's the reverse version of what you showed me before with the $sign thing.
Yes. Okay.
Right? So it's as if we're going like that, except this is on the way in. So map get post number. The context is the current HTTP request and response together. Context.response, oops. Response dot, did I do it wrong again? Dot write async. Why are you mad at me? What do you think? Context? Contexts? No?
No, nope, it's
I may be missing a parentheses.
Are you?
Let's see. Route builder, map get, something. I don't know. Test. Let's see if that works. Oh, I need to close my thing there. Build it. You'll see little subtle things like, there you go. See the difference? Now watch. The issue was I didn't have a string there yet.
And it was expecting a string.
And look what it's saying. This is really good. This is important to note mistakes like this. If I make a mistake, you'll make this mistake too, right? No overload for write async takes 0 arguments. There's no write that takes nothing.
Okay.
Yeah?
Oh, yes.
This is the thing about computers is like, you're like, oh, duh.
Yeah,
exactly.
of course. A write always takes.
Actually, there was a one time many years ago where I forgot a semicolon. And we sat there and stared at this thing for hours and hours. And we called it the $1 million semicolon because someone came in like a fresh eyes and they're like, oh, semicolon there.
Oh, that happens to me all the time.
That's programming. Nothing wrong with that. All right. So the difference here is that a URL is going to come in that says post/post number. All right. So then let's do our C# awesome string stuff. Log post ID. Now, we can access anything from within there. We can access this context here, this context object. That's the context that's being passed in, right? So I can say context dot.
What are all these options?
Get route value. Because the post for the blog, that number, that value, what do we call it, post number, can be then plucked out of the URL, and then we can output it to the user. Okay, so post number, close it. So let's take a look at that because there's a lot going on there. All right, go and map a get. If the URL looks like this, then write out the words blog post ID. Take a look at the current context, that request that just came in, and get the value of that part of the route, post number. All right?
All right.
See what that does. So, post/6. All right? Cool, eh?
Cool. So you can put any number in there.
Right. Well, here's actually where it gets pretty horrible. What if I went like this? It's not a number.
Is that a number?
All right.
How come it didn't?
Well, I never said anything about what the rules were for post number. I just said post number. Yeah. So with route ID, with routing here, you can give it a little bit more information. You can give it a little more context. So I'm going to say it has to be an int. You say colon, and then you give it a special type value, like date or int or long. Okay, so let's try that. All right. So number still works?
So let's try poo.
Well, let's not. Okay, and look.
It doesn't.
So this is important. This is different. It's not a kind of validation. You didn't validate it. It didn't match the route.
Okay, so it didn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. And even more specifically, this route, and this is the way we phrase it in the world of routing, it's no longer a greedy route. Sometimes you'll make a mistake and you'll put a route up and it's far too greedy.
That it takes in everything.
Including stuff that you're not interested in seeing. So let's say, for example, that you knew somehow that post number would only ever be 5 digits, or it always started with 9 or whatever. Yeah. You could constrain this even more with like a regular expression.
Okay.
Or you could write your own custom routing and you could say, I only want to allow values from here to here or whatever. And then that input would never even get passed into you. This code here never runs, the blue part, if that route doesn't match.
Yeah, so it gives you the 404 error.
It gives you the 404 because it goes through the process and it says, is it this one? Is it that one? Is it that one? Did that match? I'm not even going to do that. And then, of course, because we have no default, it falls through.
So going back to order matters, if I put route.map post with an int at the top,
does it change anything?
Does it change anything? Like if I go to /Scott or /Maria?
So that's a great question. It will not change anything because each of these routes is quite specific, but let's prove that. So there's this one, the second route.
Yep.
And there's post with a number. Okay, and there's Maria. Okay, but we could put another route down here, maybe.
That has string?
I don't know. Let's find out. Maybe it won't let us. So here's an int and here's a string. And this is the kind of experimenting that you, the audience, should do. And this is important. And I think people don't understand this when they think about learning and learning new frameworks and stuff like this, is they think that all the questions can be answered by reading the docs. They can't.
No, we need some testing.
You got to test it for yourself. So here we just put in that blog post, and that said blog post ID.
Now if we put in your name.
Something else.
Huh.
Okay. Now, think about ordering for a second. If I moved that, which does not have the constraint, up, would this ever get called? Let's explore this.
Let's explore this option.
Yeah, think about this. That's string. That's this one here. Right? That's int. That's that one there. Okay? If I flipped it around, what do you think?
I don't think it would.
You think it'll never happen? Why? Remember our vocab from just a moment ago. What did we just learn about routes that are greedy? There's our string. And there's our string. Strings are greedy because anything can be a string.
Everything can be. Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was a bit of a, that was a trick question, but yes.
They're greedy because an int, that can be a string. It's a string of 1, 2, 3. Cool? Oh. So lots and lots of time can be spent debugging routes where you'll be like, what is going on here? And it turns out that order matters and routes can be greedy and selfish routes. So that's a problem. So make sure that you experiment with the order of the routes are and then observe it. And it's really important to try those different techniques. So that is routing. This is not yet MVC.
Not yet MVC.
It's a general concept of routing middleware.
All right.
Okay. Next, we're going to do an introduction to MVC, Model View Controller. All right, we have reached the MVC pattern.
Yes, this is a big part of the web.
Yep. ASP.NET Core includes an implementation of the MVC pattern, and this has kind of been what we've been building up to. It sits on top of a lot of the existing concepts that we've talked about, but it's also important to point out that MVC, within the context of ASP.NET Core, is a piece of middleware.
Oh, it's middleware as well.
It is itself middleware.
Oh, yeah, because it's part of the pipeline.
And it includes other things from the pipeline like routing.
Yes, but, we're going to look at that later, but do we have to include adding routing when we add MVC to our application?
That's actually a good place to start, in fact.
Okay.
So let's do this. Let us head over into our application. This is the same app that we've been playing with. And what we're going to do here is we're going to make a couple of changes, and then we'll talk about MVC. All this work here, let's actually make a little white space just to feel more comfortable. All of that route stuff is stressing me out.
It is?
It's stressing me out, and I don't like it.
Why? Is it just too much repetition?
It's too much repetition. It's too, I want to have little functions and action methods that do the things that I want. So I'm going to delete all of that. That's gone.
Okay.
This app.run, it's been too long for this world, and that's gone too.
Yeah, we've been using it for a bit.
It's too much. Okay. So let's go and let's add MVC to this application.
So we'd be adding a new package?
Exactly. So it's adding a new package, and it's ASP NET Core MVC. This is a tricky thing to point out here.
There are two of them.
There's two. There's ASP.NET Core MVC, and then there's ASP.NET Core MVC.Core. This is a slightly smaller version of MVC. Don't use it.
I don't use the one on the top,
Don't use the one on the top.
but it's so tempting though.
It is tempting, and it should probably be lower down, or honestly, I think it should be hidden. I think the issue is that if you want the model view controller framework for ASP.NET, which is what you do, just pick that one. If you know what you're doing, this is just the core components. It gives you actually less. And I'll show you something. Remember, we saw those dependency kind of chains.
Yeah.
One depends on the other. So frankly, just get MVC and you'll be a happier person. So let's go and get that, and let's watch what happens. Okay. So within MVC, we got a lot of stuff. We've got data annotations. We've got things to make JSON and JavaScript to serialize or to create JSON. We've got localization for doing things in multiple languages. We're going to learn about Razor, which is a way to make HTML, and tag helpers that we have a whole section on.
We have a whole section tomorrow.
This is all included, and it falls all the way down. And notice that there's that MVC.Core. So it's going to show up anyway.
So if we had only installed that, we would be missing so much.
You'd be missing some important things, and you might find yourself a little frustrated. So the point I'm making is that the top level is ASP.NET Core MVC. And that includes everything that we're going to want to make either HTML or JavaScript. So that's what we want to get. So if we go back over to Startup.
So before we go into that, should we take some time and kind of figure out how MVC actually works?
Okay, let's do this. Let's add the simplest hello MVC.
Okay.
And then let's compare it to a diagram and go back and forth.
It sounds
okay?
like fun.
So let's remove routing, remove that directory browser.
It's gone.
Okay. And we're just going to say one thing. It's going to be very simple. Add MVC.
That's nice.
Nice and clean. Okay. And then we're going to say app.use MVC. And that's it. We can get rid of all that white space.
That's all that's done. So,
Okay. So what we need is a controller.
okay, because I was going to say, what's going to show up on your screen?
Exactly. Nothing. So we're going to make a controller. I'm going to go here and I'm going to make a new folder, and I'll call it controllers. And then within that, we'll add a class, and we'll call it Maria controller. Not that you're controlling, but I'm just saying. And we're going to say public string And this will be kind of our index. And remember this is very similar to what we were doing before. We have a little, what's called a lambda, a little string there, exactly. And what we're going to do is we're going to put on attribute routing. We're going to say HTTP GET /. So all that complicated routing stuff that we learned
All
about,
those lines has been put into this.
right.
That's it.
Because we're sitting on top of routing. And this is a nice, clean way to say when you do a GET, handle this here and run that little piece of code right there. Okay? So let us see if that works. And if it does, then we'll talk about it and figure it out. And if it doesn't, we will panic.
Oh.
Yep. Is that me not shutting it down? I should probably switch to IIS at some point. All right.
Okay.
Hello from MVC.
So this is basically, what we're seeing here is from the controller.
Yes, perfect.
So this is not
This is not MVC.
C. It's not a view. So like this is
Well,
not.
it's not even M or V. This
It's
is
just C.
Just C.
Okay.
So let's take a look. So you drew some diagrams to explain this to people.
Yeah, it's very how I see MVC.
You have green hair.
I have green hair because she's from another planet, but let's just go with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the user, or in this case the browser, uses the controller, passes in information from the URL. That's how you interface. You say localhost / something.
Okay.
A controller gets invoked. This controller in some way needs to be invoked. So we come in and we say /Maria. Routing is still in there.
Okay, it's still in there.
But remember, we had that HTTP GET attribute. In this case, I think we said quote, quote, /. We could certainly change that to /Maria.
Okay.
Okay. It decided that that was the controller in charge. Now, in this case, though, we didn't make a model. We didn't go to a database.
No, we didn't do anything like that.
We didn't make any HTML. We just kind of bypassed it all.
So it just went right back to the.
And we passed in the hello world string. So that was the first beginning part of the loop.
Of how things come back.
Exactly. Okay, so that's the beginning of model view controller. But we're close. We'll get there.
We'll get there?
Yeah. And let's try to add a little bit. Okay. See if this works. All right, now this is interesting.
So what's just happened?
Notice that the name of the method there doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter at all.
Because we mapped /Maria to a method that we just happened to call something else. There is no particular reason that it needed to be, there needed to be a relationship. We didn't need to call that Maria.
I don't, so, but we just didn't.
We called it something else, and it got mapped that way.
Okay.
And we could do a test even, where let's go ahead and close that, and let us change this. We'll just get rid of that attribute. We'll call this method Maria, and see if we can access it that way. Do you think it will work?
I think it will. But that's. Oh.
Why not?
Because it doesn't have a mapped attribute?
It doesn't have a route, exactly. There's no routing attribute, and there's no other route over in startup. Because you can have centralized routes, and you can have routing attributes.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're going to add another attribute on top of that?
Well, so we could go and put it back like that, which is totally fine. But we could also do what's called convention over configuration. We could kind of just agree that we wanted our URLs to map to controllers in a certain way. We could just kind of decide, Like if it's the Maria controller, it should be /Maria.
Okay.
And the Scott controller would automatically be /Scott.
Scott. Okay, so it would look for it.
It would look for it automatically. So back over here, when we did our very, very